Hey everyone! So buckle up because I've got a story for you that's wilder than anything you've seen on reality TV. It all started 3 weeks ago, and trust me, you won't believe the ride I've been on. You know Tobias, right? My boyfriend? Or should I say, ex-boyfriend now. He's a special kind of guy, the kind who redefines unbelievable every single day. And guess what? He just texted me asking me to dinner, saying he has something important to discuss. Can you even with this man? This is the same Tobias who just a few days ago was snuggled up in another woman's bed, taking a shirtless selfie, all to make some twisted point about trust. And here I am staring at my phone wondering if the man I've been dating has officially lost his mind, or if this is just another cruel test of my patience. Honestly, it's been a 3-week hurricane of bizarre behavior. And the truth is, it might be both. So let me take you back to the very beginning of this wild ride. 3 weeks ago, my world felt normal. Like blissfully normal. Tobias comes home from work and casually drops a bomb disguised as a roommate crisis. His friend Andrea was in a bind. Her roommate bailed, leaving her scrambling for rent. My first thought? Okay, how can we help? I was picturing myself scrolling through apartment listings, offering moral support. You know, the usual supportive girlfriend stuff. But then Tobias, with a straight face, delivered the punchline. He was moving in with Andrea. Just like that. No discussion, no, how do you feel about this, honey? Just a blunt announcement that my boyfriend was now going to be living with another woman. I actually chuckled. I mean, who does that? Who declares they're essentially cohabiting with a female friend and expects their girlfriend to just nod along? But Tobias wasn't laughing. He was looking at me, almost expecting applause for his selfless act. When I voiced my discomfort, a condescending smirk spread across his face. "You're being selfish," he accused. Selfish. Because I dared to have boundaries. He twisted it into a trust issue, claiming my reaction exposed my true colors. I tried to explain that this wasn't about trust. It was about respect. About basic relationship boundaries. But he just kept circling back, painting me as controlling and insecure, as if those words were meant to silence me. Our argument dragged on, a dizzying display of mental gymnastics. He'd bring up innocuous moments, a friendly chat with a male coworker, a text from my ex Brian, trying to equate them with him literally moving in with another woman. It was exhausting, like trying to argue with a brick wall that occasionally throws out random non-sequiturs. What truly stung was his portrayal of Andrea as some fragile damsel in distress, utterly incapable without his personal intervention. This woman is 25, has a solid job, a college degree. She's not helpless. There are countless ways to navigate a roommate crisis that don't involve my boyfriend playing house with her. Yet, according to Tobias, I was heartless for suggesting alternatives. Every solution I offered was dismissed, because apparently, nothing could possibly work except him, Tobias, saving the day by becoming her live-in hero. The ego was staggering, like a skyscraper built on quicksand. But the real betrayal? Discovering Andrea was fully aware of our arguments. Tobias had been confiding in her, seeking her input on my supposed trust issues. The thought of them dissecting my behavior, strategizing about our relationship behind my back, ignited a furious fire within me. So, I stood my ground. I told him I wasn't okay with it, and that he needed to find other ways to help Andrea. I genuinely believed he'd respect my feelings. I was naive, wasn't I? Last Friday night, Tobias announced he was heading to Andrea's to help organize a spare room for potential roommate interviews. He mentioned he'd likely be late. Fine. Whatever. I had plans with my friend Laura anyway, so I didn't dwell on it. But Saturday morning arrived, and silence. No good morning text, no check-in. When I finally texted asking about the organizing, he casually replied that he'd crashed there because they worked really late, and he was too tired to drive home. Annoyed, yes, but I tried to be understanding. Maybe it was a practical decision. Then, around noon, my phone buzzed with a notification that made my blood run cold. It was a selfie from Tobias, in Andrea's bed. shirtless. The caption? Some people trust, some people don't. I stared at that image, my mind reeling. My boyfriend, in another woman's bed, sending me a smug photo to prove a point. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. Who does that? Who believes this is how you build trust? It felt like a deliberate attempt to provoke, to push every single one of my buttons. I called him immediately. He answered, annoyingly cheerful. When I demanded to know what he thought he was doing, he feigned confusion. He claimed he was being transparent, showing me where he was instead of hiding it. Transparent? A shirtless selfie from another woman's bed is not transparency. It's a calculated insult, a slap in the face with a side of passive aggression. The conversation spiraled. I told him the picture was disrespectful and hurtful, and that spending the night at Andrea's was a line he'd crossed. Instead of apologizing, or showing an ounce of empathy, he doubled down. He insisted I was proving his point about not trusting him, and that if I were secure, I wouldn't make such a big deal out of him helping a friend. He even had the gall to suggest my reaction was reason enough for him to reconsider our relationship dynamics. It was then I realized this wasn't just about Andrea's roommate situation. This was about Tobias seeing how much he could get away with, how far he could push me. And he was about to find out. But the true kicker came Sunday evening. A Facebook message from Andrea herself. I'd never spoken to this woman directly, yet she felt entitled to inject herself into our drama. Her message was short, sharp. You should grow a backbone if you want to date someone like Tobias. Your insecurity is embarrassing to watch. He deserves someone who can handle him having female friends without creating drama. I screenshotted that message so fast it was ridiculous. The sheer nerve of this woman, messaging me about my relationship, was beyond anything I could have imagined. And the knowledge that she was clearly discussing our private issues with Tobias only intensified my fury, like adding fuel to an already raging fire. When I confronted Tobias, he barely flinched. He said she was just looking out for him because she saw how stressed our fights made him. He defended her right to message me, even suggesting I listen to what she had to say. That was the precise moment I understood. I was dating a man who believed it was acceptable for his female friend to lecture his girlfriend on relationship boundaries. A man who saw nothing wrong with another woman dictating how I should handle my own boyfriend. So here we are, 3 weeks into this absolute nightmare. And Tobias just texted, asking about dinner, claiming he has something important to tell me. Part of me is morbidly curious about what grand announcement he has planned. But a much larger part of me is already rehearsing my lines, preparing for the showdown. Because while Tobias has been playing his little games, testing my limits, I've been doing some planning of my own. And I think it's time he learned that some tests cut both ways. I'll update you all after dinner. Something tells me this is going to be interesting. Okay, you guys, I'm in my car in the restaurant parking lot because I honestly cannot process what just transpired. Remember Tobias's important dinner? Well, buckle up because he has completely lost his mind, and I'm left wondering if I ever truly knew him. I arrived first, spending 10 minutes mentally bracing myself for whatever bombshell he was about to drop. A small part of me, a hopeful, delusional part, imagined he might have come to his senses, ready to apologize for the Andrea situation. Nope, not even close. Tobias strode in, radiating an almost irritating confidence for someone who'd spent the weekend disrespecting his girlfriend in every conceivable way. He slid into the booth opposite me. That smile I once found charming now looked utterly smug. No apology, no acknowledgement of the chaotic days behind us. Just casual small talk, as if nothing had happened. When I finally asked what was so urgent, he adopted a serious expression, declaring he'd been doing a lot of thinking about our relationship and where things were heading. My stomach plummeted. That tone usually precedes a breakup. But instead of ending things, he launched into a meticulously rehearsed speech about how our recent conflicts had revealed concerning patterns in my behavior. He was worried about my trust issues and their potential impact on our future. The sheer audacity of this man to flip the script and make me the problem after everything he'd done was utterly mind-blowing. I cut him off, incredulous. Are you seriously sitting across from me trying to blame your inappropriate behavior on me? But he powered through, spouting platitudes about trust and compromise, and whether I was truly ready for the kind of mature relationship he was looking for. Then came the actual bombshell. He announced, with a flourish, that he had decided to move forward with helping Andrea, regardless of my feelings. He wasn't going to let my insecurities dictate how he treated his friends. He delivered this as if it were some noble declaration of friendship and loyalty, rather than a colossal betrayal of our relationship. I stared at him for 30 long seconds, trying to comprehend the words. This man had just told me he was moving in with another woman, despite my explicitly stated boundaries, and he was framing it as a matter of principle, not a devastating blow to our partnership. Are you actually telling me, I asked, my voice dangerously calm, that you're prioritizing Andrea's housing situation over my comfort and our relationship boundaries? His response? He wasn't choosing anyone over anyone else. He was simply refusing to abandon a friend in need because his girlfriend couldn't handle it. The conversation that followed was surreal. Tobias kept insisting this wasn't about choosing Andrea over me. It was about me learning to trust him and support his friendships. He claimed that if I really loved him, I'd want him to be the kind of person who shows up for his friends. Every attempt I made to explain why his decision was hurtful and disrespectful was met with a variation of how my reaction proved I wasn't ready for a serious relationship. He liberally tossed around phrases like emotional maturity and healthy boundaries, but apparently those concepts only applied to me adapting to his desires. What truly infuriated me was his constant implication that I was asking him to abandon Andrea completely, rather than simply maintain appropriate boundaries. When I pointed out there were a million ways to help a friend that didn't involve him moving in, he dismissed them as ineffective. Andrea, he claimed, specifically needed someone she could trust living in her space. When I pressed on why it had to be him, he replied that Andrea had asked him because she felt safest with him. The way he said it made it clear he was utterly flattered by being her chosen protector, and my discomfort was just an inconvenient obstacle to his hero fantasy. The entire conversation felt like a scene from a manipulation playbook. Every concern I raised was twisted into a character flaw on my part. Every boundary I tried to set was brushed aside as controlling or insecure. It was like arguing with someone who had already decided I was wrong about everything, just going through the motions of pretending to listen. What made it even worse was his calm, rational demeanor, as he completely steamrolled everything I said. He adopted this condescending, almost therapist-like voice, as if he were helping me work through my issues, rather than defending his own wildly inappropriate behavior. When I asked him how he would feel if the situation were reversed, if I decided to move in with a male friend, Tobias actually laughed. He said, "That's completely different. I trust you. I wouldn't feel threatened by something like that." The smugness in his voice made me want to throw my water glass at his head. I pressed him on that blatant double standard, urging him to truly consider if he'd be okay with me living with another man for several weeks. That's when his composed, rational act began to crack. He mumbled that the situations weren't comparable because Andrea genuinely needed help, while my hypothetical male friend would just be taking advantage of my kindness. The mental gymnastics were honestly impressive. Somehow, Andrea's need for help was a legitimate crisis demanding Tobias's personal intervention. But if I were to help a male friend, I would be taken advantage of. The double standard was so blatant, it was almost comical. But the real kicker came when I asked him what he expected our relationship to look like while he was living with Andrea. Would we still see each other regularly? Would I be welcome to visit him at her place? How long was this arrangement supposed to last? That's when Tobias became visibly uncomfortable, offering vague, non-committal answers about how we'd figure it out as we went along. He couldn't put a timeline on helping a friend, he claimed, and I'd need to be flexible about our usual routines while Andrea got back on her feet. When I pushed for specifics, he finally admitted that Andrea wasn't really comfortable with me coming around while she was dealing with her housing stress. My presence, he said, might create tension and drama, and make an already difficult situation even harder for her. So, let me get this straight. My boyfriend was moving in with another woman who didn't want me visiting for an indefinite period to help with a problem that had dozens of alternative solutions. And I was the unreasonable one for having an issue with this arrangement? I asked him if he could hear how insane that sounded. His response? Andrea's feelings matter. Everyone involved deserves to feel comfortable in their living space. Apparently, everyone except me, since my feelings about my own boyfriend's living arrangements seemed to matter not at all. I leaned back in that booth, truly looking at the man across from me. And for the first time in 8 months, I saw him clearly. This wasn't a temporary lapse in judgment or a simple miscommunication. This was who he truly was when he couldn't manipulate me into going along with his desires. So I asked him one simple question. If our roles were reversed, I said, and I announced I was moving in with some guy despite your objections, would you be okay with that? Not just okay, but actually supportive and understanding. The look that flashed across his face told me everything I needed to know before he even opened his mouth. For a fleeting moment, his mask slipped, and I saw his true feelings about the idea of me prioritizing another man's needs over his comfort. But then he recovered, slipping back into his rational, therapist-like voice. He said hypothetical situations weren't helpful, and we needed to focus on the actual circumstances. When I pointed out that his inability to answer my question was quite telling, he accused me of trying to trap him, and claimed my argumentative attitude was exactly why he was concerned about our relationship dynamic. Everything, of course, was my fault. My argumentative attitude, my trust issues, my inability to support his friendships, my lack of emotional maturity. According to Tobias, I was a walking red flag. Lucky he was patient enough to help me work through my problems. By the time we left the restaurant, he'd made it crystal clear. He was moving in with Andrea whether I liked it or not, and my job as his girlfriend was to smile and be supportive while he played house with another woman, who had specifically requested I stay away. But here's the thing Tobias doesn't realize. While he was busy outlining all the ways I needed to change my behavior and attitude, I was making some plans of my own. Because if he thinks I'm just going to sit around waiting for him to return from his little domestic experiment with Andrea, he's about to learn just how wrong he can be. I have some serious thinking to do tonight. And tomorrow, I'm making some phone calls. If Tobias wants to test my boundaries and see how much disrespect I'll tolerate, he's about to get his answer. And something tells me it won't be what he's expecting. I'll update you all tomorrow, after I've had time to process this mess and figure out my next move. But spoiler alert, I'm done being the understanding girlfriend who makes excuses for her boyfriend's inappropriate behavior. The gloves, my friends, are officially coming off. You guys, I am having way too much fun with this situation. Honestly, watching Tobias dig himself deeper into this hole, all while thinking he's being so clever, has become my new favorite form of entertainment. If he wants to play games and test my boundaries, well, two can absolutely play that game. So, remember how I said the gloves were coming off? I spent Wednesday making some calls and putting things into motion. And let me tell you, it's been an absolute blast watching this whole thing unfold. Wednesday night, Tobias sent me this casual little announcement about packing his stuff to move into Andrea's place over the weekend. No discussion, no check-in, just a matter-of-fact message, like he was telling me he'd picked up dry cleaning. The audacity was truly impressive. But it also gave me the perfect opportunity to start having some fun. Instead of getting upset or arguing with him, I responded, "That's nice, honey. Make sure you pack your toothbrush. Wouldn't want Andrea to think you have bad hygiene when you're playing house together." The passive-aggressive sweetness was chef's kiss perfect. He called me within 10 minutes, clearly bewildered by my response. When he asked why I was being sarcastic, I calmly told him I wasn't being sarcastic at all. I was simply being supportive of his new living arrangement with his female friend. The way I emphasized supportive made it clear I was mocking him, but he couldn't quite call me out on it. That phone call was honestly hilarious. Tobias kept trying to bait me into an argument about boundaries and trust, but I just kept responding with these sweet, understanding comments that were obviously sarcastic, but technically supportive. Every time he'd explain why his decision was reasonable, I'd say something like, "Oh, absolutely, that makes perfect sense. I'm sure Andrea really appreciates having such a caring roommate." By the end of the call, he was clearly frustrated that I wasn't giving him the dramatic reaction he expected. He actually asked me directly why I wasn't more upset. And I told him I'd been doing some thinking and had come to some interesting conclusions about our relationship. When he pressed for details, I said we could discuss it later because I had some plans of my own to figure out. The confusion in his voice was absolutely delicious. He'd expected me to be begging him not to move in with Andrea, not making mysterious comments about my own plans. Thursday morning, I woke up to a string of texts from him, documenting his packing progress, as if I was supposed to care about the logistics of him moving in with another woman. He sent pictures of boxes, and even asked if I wanted to help him load his car. The level of delusion was breathtaking. But instead of ignoring the messages, I decided to play along. I responded to each picture with increasingly ridiculous comments. When he sent a photo of his packed clothes, I wrote, "Make sure you pack something nice for your dinner dates with Andrea." When he showed me his toiletries box, I said, "Don't forget condoms. You never know what might happen during those late-night movie sessions." The fact that he couldn't tell if I was being serious or mocking him made it even better. He kept sending confused responses, asking what I meant, and I'd just send back innocent emojis, like I had no idea why he was confused. Thursday afternoon, I put phase 2 of my plan into action. Remember my ex, Brian, the one Tobias had thrown in my face during our trust arguments? Well, I decided it was time for him to meet his match when it came to opposite-sex friendships. I texted Brian asking if he wanted to grab coffee and catch up, and his response was immediate and enthusiastic. When we met, I told him about Tobias's living situation with Andrea, and Brian's reaction was everything I'd hoped for. He was genuinely shocked, saying he couldn't believe any guy would disrespect his girlfriend like that. But here's where it gets good. While we were talking, I started getting texts from Tobias, updating me on his move-in progress. So I started reading them out loud to Brian, and we both started laughing at how ridiculous the whole situation was. Brian said he couldn't believe Tobias was sending me play-by-play updates about moving in with another woman, and that if he were my boyfriend, he'd be focused on making me feel secure, not some random female friend. That's when a brilliant idea sparked. I asked Brian if he wanted to help me send Tobias a little message of my own. Brian was immediately on board, so we took a selfie together at the coffee shop, and I posted it to my Instagram story with the caption, "Catching up with old friends who actually know how to respect boundaries." Within 20 minutes, my phone was buzzing with a call from Tobias. When I answered, he immediately demanded to know who I was with and why I was posting cryptic Instagram stories. I calmly told him I was just catching up with Brian, and that we'd been having a really interesting conversation. The jealousy in his voice was immediate and obvious. He started firing questions. Why was I hanging out with my ex? What had we been talking about? When I told him Brian had been giving me some perspective on my current relationship situation, Tobias's voice took on a panicked edge. I remained completely calm, saying that since he was exploring new living arrangements, I figured I could explore reconnecting with old friends too. I could practically hear his brain short-circuiting on the other end. Friday morning, Tobias called to let me know he was officially moved in at Andrea's place. But his tone was far less cheerful than before. He kept asking about my plans for the day and whether I was going to see Brian again. When I casually mentioned Brian and I might grab dinner later, the silence on the phone was absolutely golden. Instead of his usual confident lecture about trust and friendship, Tobias started asking why I felt the need to spend so much time with my ex. I gently reminded him that he'd spent weeks telling me that opposite-sex friendships were totally normal, and that anyone who had a problem with them was just insecure. He tried to explain why my situation with Brian was different from his situation with Andrea, but every reason he gave just highlighted his own hypocrisy. When I pointed that out with fake innocence, he got even more flustered. That evening, Brian and I did go to dinner, and I made sure to document it thoroughly. We took pictures of our food, selfies at the restaurant, and I even posted a story of us sharing dessert with the caption, "When someone actually knows how to make you feel special." My phone immediately started blowing up with texts from Tobias, but I didn't respond until later that night. When I finally called him back, he immediately started interrogating me about my evening with Brian. I told him we'd had the most amazing time, and that it was so refreshing to be with someone who actually listened to me and cared about my feelings. I said Brian had been asking about my relationship and couldn't believe how Tobias had been treating me. The panic in Tobias's voice was absolutely delicious. He started insisting that Brian was probably just trying to manipulate me because he wanted to get back together, and that I was being naive if I couldn't see what was really happening. I laughed and said it was interesting that he was so concerned about another man's motives when he'd been lecturing me for weeks about trusting people and not being insecure. I asked him why he was suddenly so worried about my friendships when his own living situation was supposedly so innocent. Saturday, I decided to really turn up the heat. Brian and I spent the day together. We went to the farmer's market, walked around downtown, and just had this really natural, easy time together. I documented everything on social media, making sure to show how happy and relaxed I looked. Meanwhile, Tobias kept texting me, asking what I was doing and why I wasn't responding to his messages. When I finally responded that evening, I told him I'd been having such a great day that I hadn't even looked at my phone. That night, when Tobias called, he was clearly agitated. He started lecturing me about how my behavior with Brian was inappropriate and disrespectful to our relationship. I told him I found it fascinating that he was suddenly so concerned about relationship boundaries when he'd been living with another woman all week. When he tried to explain the difference, I cut him off and said that Brian had been helping me gain some real perspective on what I deserved in a relationship. Sunday morning, I woke up to Instagram stories from Andrea, showing her and Tobias's domestic routine. Making breakfast together, organizing closets, cuddling on the couch. But instead of getting upset, I screenshotted them and sent them to Brian with laughing emojis. Brian and I spent Sunday together too. And honestly, it felt amazing to be with someone who was actually focused on making me happy, instead of prioritizing another woman's needs. We had this incredibly natural chemistry, and I found myself remembering why I'd been so attracted to him in the first place. When Tobias called Sunday night, I could tell he was getting desperate. He started asking directly if something was going on between me and Brian, and I told him that Brian had been showing me what it felt like to be someone's actual priority. The way Tobias's voice changed was everything I'd been hoping for. All his confidence and smugness just evaporated, and he started backtracking about his living arrangement, saying that maybe we needed to talk about finding some compromises. I was having way too much fun to let him off the hook that easily. I told him that I'd been doing some thinking about what I really wanted in a relationship, and that spending time with Brian had been really eye-opening. When he asked what I meant, I said that Brian had reminded me what it felt like to be with someone who actually respected my feelings and made me feel valued. I said the contrast was honestly pretty stark. Tobias started talking about how he loved me and how we could work things out, but I could tell he was finally realizing that his little manipulation game had completely backfired. I told him I needed more time to think about everything, and that I'd be in touch when I was ready to discuss our future. Now it's Monday, and my phone has been constantly buzzing with increasingly frantic messages from Tobias. He's oscillating between trying to convince me that I'm overreacting and panicking about my friendship with Brian. If Tobias wanted to test my boundaries and see how much he could get away with, well, he's about to learn that I'm much better at this game than he thought. Some people think they can manipulate their girlfriend into accepting whatever they want to do. But some people are about to discover that two can play at manipulation. And I'm apparently much better at it. Stay tuned for tomorrow's update, because I have a feeling our final conversation is going to be absolutely epic. And spoiler alert, I'm not the one who's going to be begging for forgiveness. Guys, I am dead. I literally cannot stop laughing at what just happened. Tobias just had the most epic meltdown on FaceTime, and I got it all on video. This man really thought he could manipulate me, and I'd just sit there and take it. Nope. So after watching him panic all week about me and Brian, I decided it was time for the grand finale. He'd been sending me these pathetic texts about needing to discuss boundaries, which was rich coming from someone living with another woman. When we FaceTimed, he was at Andrea's place, acting all high and mighty. I could see her stupid motivational quotes on the wall behind him, and some fancy candles she probably made him buy. He started lecturing me about how my friendship with Brian was inappropriate. This fool is literally playing house with some girl and wants to tell me about appropriate behavior. But here's the thing. I've been having the best week ever with Brian. We've been inseparable. And honestly, it feels incredible being with someone who actually gives a damn about me. And wait for it. We just booked a trip to Italy next week. Brian surprised me with tickets yesterday, and I'm literally bouncing off the walls excited. First-class tickets to Rome, and he already booked us this amazing hotel in Tuscany with a private balcony overlooking the vineyards. So when Tobias started his usual manipulation speech, I just smiled and told him how amazing Brian had been. How he actually knows how to treat a woman and prioritize her feelings. Tobias's face started turning red immediately, and I could see him trying to stay calm but failing miserably. I could hear his friends in the background, because apparently he thought having an audience would intimidate me. Wrong move. I got even bolder and started talking about how Brian had been staying over, and how much better I felt with someone who actually cared. I made sure to mention how Brian brought me coffee in bed this morning, and how we'd spent the whole weekend together just enjoying each other's company. The way Tobias was squirming was beautiful. He kept trying to explain why his situation was different, but he just kept digging himself deeper. So I asked him straight up, "How is it different? Explain it to me." And your friends who are obviously listening to every word. That's when he totally lost it. Started yelling about how I was being vindictive and crazy. All his cool manipulation tactics went out the window, and he showed everyone exactly who he really is. I could hear someone in the background saying, "Dude, chill," which made it even better. But the best part was when I told him about Italy. I said Brian had surprised me with this amazing trip, and that we'd be spending a whole week together exploring Rome and Venice. I made sure to mention the first-class flights and 5-star hotel, because I knew it would eat him alive. Tobias looked like he was going to throw up, and I swear I heard Andrea gasp in the background. Then I really went in for the kill. I told him he should probably enjoy his time with Andrea while it lasts, because, let's be real, once she finds an actual boyfriend, where exactly does he think he's going to end up? I said it so sweetly, too. Like, Tobias, honey, you do realize you're just Andrea's convenient helper boy right now, right? Like when she finds someone she actually wants to date, you'll be tossed out faster than yesterday's garbage. Though she might keep you around to do her laundry, or fix her computer, or whatever other free labor she needs. The silence that followed was incredible. His friends were trying not to laugh, and you could tell Andrea heard every word, because there was this awkward tension in the background. I think I heard someone whisper, "Oh, damn," which honestly made my whole day. I kept going because I was on a roll. I said, "You really think you're her knight in shining armor? But you're more like her personal assistant who pays rent. She's using you as a placeholder until someone better comes along. You're basically a very expensive doormat with benefits." Tobias was fuming, but he couldn't really deny it because deep down, he knows it's true. Andrea's not stupid. She's getting free help with rent and household stuff from some guy who's convinced himself he's being noble. I bet she's already swiping on dating apps while he's organizing her closet. I decided to really twist the knife and said, "I give it 2 months before she brings some new guy home and suddenly your friendship isn't so important anymore. Hope you're saving up for a security deposit because you're going to need it when she kicks you to the curb." That's when he made his biggest mistake. He screamed, "Get over yourself or get lost! I'm giving you one last chance to chill out or we're done." I literally started laughing, like actually giggling on camera. I said, "Tobias, sweetie, we been done. You moved in with another woman, and I moved on to someone who actually knows my worth. There is no last chance here, because I already upgraded." The panic in his eyes was everything. He immediately started backtracking, saying he didn't mean it and we could work things out. But I was already done with this conversation and having way too much fun. I told him, "While you're busy being Andrea's live-in help, Brian and I will be sipping wine in Tuscany. Have fun organizing her closets and assembling her IKEA furniture, or whatever it is doormat roommates do. Maybe she'll even let you hold her purse when she goes on dates with actual men." His friends were definitely laughing at this point, because I could hear multiple people trying to muffle their reactions. Andrea's voice came from somewhere off camera, sounding really annoyed. And I think she was telling everyone to be quiet. Then I hung up while he was still sputtering, and trying to get his friends to stop laughing. My phone immediately blew up with texts from random numbers, because apparently, Tobias was grabbing everyone's phones trying to reach me. The desperation was honestly pathetic. He sent like 15 messages from different people's phones, begging me to talk to him, and saying he made a mistake. But then Andrea had the nerve to message me on Instagram saying I should grow a backbone, and that my behavior during the call was embarrassing. This woman who's using my ex-boyfriend as a personal ATM and handyman wants to lecture me about embarrassing behavior. I screenshot her message and posted it to my story with, "When your ex's sugar mama thinks she can give you relationship advice." And my friends went absolutely off in the comments. Laura replied with crying laughing emojis and said, "She really thought she did something there." My cousin Anna commented, "The audacity of this entire woman," which had me rolling. Brian thinks the whole thing is hilarious. He keeps saying he can't believe Tobias actually thought he could treat me like garbage while I'd just sit around waiting for him. We've been planning our Italy trip all evening, and honestly, life is so good right now. He showed me pictures of the hotel restaurant, and apparently they have this amazing rooftop terrace where we can watch the sunset over the hills. The funniest part is hearing through friends that Tobias is trying to tell people I manipulated him and that I'm crazy and vindictive. This man moved in with another woman, sent me selfies from her bed, and somehow I'm the manipulator? The math isn't mathing. What he doesn't get is that I'm not upset about losing him. I'm relieved. Watching him show his true colors saved me from wasting any more time on someone who thinks girlfriends should just accept whatever crumbs they're offered while he plays house with other women. Tomorrow we're going shopping for our trip, and he wants to buy me a new dress for our fancy dinner in Rome. I genuinely cannot remember the last time I was this excited about anything. To anyone dealing with someone who thinks they can test your boundaries and manipulate you, don't even bother arguing with them. Just upgrade to someone better and watch them lose their minds when they realize you're not sitting around crying over them. Tobias really thought he was so clever playing his little games. But while he was busy being Andrea's errand boy and live-in maintenance man, I was out here securing an actual man who treats me like a queen and books surprise trips to Europe. Can't wait to post pictures from Italy while this fool is probably assembling Andrea's new dresser or something equally tragic. Living well really is the best revenge. And I'm about to be living very well in Tuscany with someone who actually deserves me.